For millennia, the Galactic Empire has expanded across star systems, crushing resistance beneath the weight of star destroyers and the iron will of the Sith. But what happens when that empire turns its gaze toward a world that has never known the Force? A planet where heroes rise not from ancient orders, but from science, accident, and indomitable will. 6 months after the Battle of New York, humanity believed it understood its place in the universe. The Chitauri invasion had been a wake-up call, proof that Earth was not alone, that threats existed beyond the stars. S.H.I.E.L.D. worked overtime cataloging alien technology. The Avengers stood ready, fractured but functional. Tony Stark upgraded his armor obsessively, convinced the next threat would be worse. He had no idea how right he was. It started as astronomical anomalies. Observatories from Chile to Hawaii detected spatial distortions unlike anything in recorded history. Not wormholes like the one Loki had opened, but something else entirely. Ripples in space-time that suggested massive objects moving faster than light itself. NASA scrambled to analyze the data. S.H.I.E.L.D. went to DEFCON 2. Nick Fury made 3 phone calls. Then the sky over New York City tore open. No swirling portal, no cosmic light show. Just the sudden, terrifying emergence of something so massive it defied comprehension. The first Star Destroyer materialized above Manhattan at 2:47 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, its wedge-shaped hull stretching nearly a mile from bow to stern. Shadows fell across entire city blocks as the dagger-gray vessel hung in the afternoon sky like a monument to impossible engineering. Car alarms screamed in unison. Traffic stopped. 8 million people looked up simultaneously, their minds struggling to process what their eyes reported. This wasn't like the Chitauri Leviathans, organic, chaotic, alien in the truest sense. This was industrial, designed, built with purpose and devastating intent. Then the second Star Destroyer appeared over Washington, D.C. The third materialized above London. Within 18 minutes, every major news network on Earth broadcast the same impossible image: colossal warships hanging in atmosphere above 3 of the world's most powerful cities, their hulls bristling with weapons that made aircraft carriers look like children's toys. Smaller craft, angular fighters that moved with predatory grace, patrolled the perimeter in precise formations. The vessels made no hostile moves, launched no attacks. They simply waited. Fury's voice crackled over the Avengers' emergency frequency, reaching Tony Stark in his Malibu workshop, Steve Rogers at a S.H.I.E.L.D. training facility, and Bruce Banner in a Calcutta safe house simultaneously. Code Black. All assets to the helicarrier. This is not a drill. Thor was off-world, unreachable. But the others moved immediately, converging on S.H.I.E.L.D.'s mobile command center as it lifted off from the Atlantic Ocean. Natasha Romanoff and Clint Barton were already aboard, their faces grim as they reviewed tactical displays that made no sense. Tony arrived first, the Iron Man armor screaming through the air at Mach 3. He'd done flybys of all 3 ships during his approach, his HUD recording data that Jarvis could barely process. Boss, his AI reported with uncharacteristic hesitation. The energy signatures from these vessels don't match any known technology. The power output from a single ship exceeds the entire electrical grid of North America. Great, Tony muttered, landing on the helicarrier deck. Just great. The briefing room felt suffocating despite its size. Fury stood before a holographic display showing all 3 Star Destroyers, their positions creating a perfect triangle across the Atlantic. 72 minutes ago, these appeared in our atmosphere. No hyperspace signature we can detect, no advanced warning. They're just here. Have they made contact? Steve asked, his voice steady despite the tension in his shoulders. Negative. Radio silence on all frequencies. But Fury pulled up a new image, and the room fell silent. Smaller landing craft had descended from each Star Destroyer, not attacking, but establishing perimeters. In New York, metallic walkers, four-legged behemoths that stood 30 meters tall, had deployed in Central Park. Armored figures in white held positions at key intersections, their weapons trained outward in defensive postures. The same scene repeated in DC and London. "They're not invading," Natasha observed quietly. "They're occupying. There's a difference." "They're showing us what they can do," Bruce added, his voice tight. "This is a demonstration." Tony's fingers flew across his tablet, pulling up his own scans. Jarvis ran the numbers. Those walking tanks, impervious to conventional weapons, the energy shields on the big ships would shrug off nuclear strikes, and the troop deployment patterns. He looked up, meeting Fury's eye. "This is professional, military. Whoever they are, they've done this before." "Then we hit them before they finish setting up," Clint suggested. "Coordinated strike, all 3 cities simultaneously." "With what?" Tony shot back. "I've got maybe 7 suits combat ready. Cap's got a shield. We're talking about mile-long warships with technology centuries beyond ours." "So we just surrender?" Steve's voice carried an edge of steel. "I'm saying we need more information before we—" The lights flickered. Every screen in the briefing room went dark for 3 seconds, then blazed back to life. But they no longer showed shield data. Instead, a single image appeared across every display, every television screen, every computer monitor on Earth simultaneously. A figure in black armor stood against a backdrop of stars. A flowing cape, a helmet that reflected no light, only darkness, and the sound, rhythmic, mechanical breathing that somehow conveyed more menace than any words. When Darth Vader spoke, his voice resonated through every speaker on the planet, translated instantly into every human language through technology that made universal translation look like magic. "People of Earth, I am Lord Vader, Supreme Commander of the Imperial Fleet. Your world has been located in the Outer Rim territories, previously uncharted and unclaimed. By decree of Emperor Palpatine, sovereign ruler of the Galactic Empire, this system now falls under Imperial jurisdiction." The breathing punctuated his pause. "You have 72 hours to acknowledge Imperial authority. Surrender will be met with order and stability. Resistance will be met with the full might of the Empire. Choose wisely." The transmission ended. Screens returned to normal. And in the terrible silence that followed, Nick Fury voiced what everyone was thinking. "We're going to need a bigger team." The world didn't panic immediately. Humanity had survived the Chitauri invasion barely 6 months ago. Alien threats were no longer theoretical. But the Chitauri had been chaotic, animalistic, a horde that could be fought and defeated. The Empire was something else entirely. This was civilization, order, power so overwhelming it didn't need to prove itself through violence. That terrified people more than any monster ever could. Within hours of Vader's ultimatum, the United Nations convened an emergency session. Every nation sent representatives. Every screen in the assembly hall displayed the same tactical nightmare. 3 star destroyers, countless support craft, and military assets that made Earth's combined arsenals look primitive. The debate was predictably fractured. Some nations advocated immediate compliance, others demanded resistance at any cost, and a few simply refused to believe this wasn't an elaborate hoax. The argument became moot when Lord Vader made his second appearance. He didn't broadcast this time. He simply walked out of an Imperial landing craft in the middle of Times Square at 10 a.m., flanked by 20 stormtroopers in pristine white armor. No warning, no negotiation, just a statement of presence. The Dark Lord stood 7 feet tall in his armor, the mechanical breathing echoing off buildings as thousands of smartphones captured his image from every angle. New York police surrounded the landing zone within minutes, weapons drawn but hands shaking. Vader didn't acknowledge them. He walked, slowly, deliberately, toward the massive screens that dominated the square, ignoring the shouted commands to stop, to identify himself, to show his hands. When the first officer fired, the bullet stopped 3 feet from Vader's chest. just stopped, suspended in midair, as if frozen in time. The Dark Lord raised one gloved hand, and the officer's gun crumpled like aluminum foil. Then every weapon within 100 yards did the same, folding in on itself with metallic shrieks that sent civilians running. "Your weapons are irrelevant," Vader announced, his voice carrying across the square without amplification. "Your resistance is irrelevant. The Emperor offers you peace and prosperity under Imperial rule. Consider carefully before you refuse." He turned to leave, then paused. His helmet tilted slightly as if sensing something. "There are others among you, warriors who fought the Chitauri. Tell them Lord Vader awaits their answer." The landing craft lifted off, leaving only crushed police weapons and a million new videos flooding the internet. Tony Stark watched the footage 3 times in the helicarrier's lab, his expression growing darker with each replay. Jarvis analysis. The projectile deceleration suggests localized gravitational manipulation or directed energy fields operating on principles outside known physics, the AI reported. The weapon's destruction appears to be telekinesis, remote application of physical force without detectable energy signatures. "Magic," Tony muttered. "Great, we're fighting space wizards." "More like space fascists with magic," Natasha corrected, entering the lab with a tablet full of intelligence reports. "S.H.I.E.L.D's been digging into the broadcasts. That symbol on their ships, we've cross-referenced it against every database we have. Nothing. Whatever this Galactic Empire is, they've never contacted Earth before." Steve Rogers stood by the window, watching New York's skyline. The Star Destroyer hung above the city like a sword of Damocles, its shadow a constant reminder of powerlessness. "They're being careful," he observed. "Vader could have killed those officers. He didn't. This whole operation, it's designed to minimize resistance through fear rather than violence." "Psychological warfare," Clint added from his perch near the door. "Show overwhelming force, make one demonstration of power, then wait for us to convince ourselves fighting is pointless. Is it?" Bruce Banner's question hung in the air. He sat at a secondary workstation, reviewing the data Tony had compiled. "Pointless, I mean, because these numbers..." "Tony, even if the other guy goes full rage mode, those ships have planetary bombardment capabilities. They could glass entire continents from orbit." Tony didn't answer immediately. His fingers flew across holographic displays, running simulation after simulation. Every scenario ended the same way: Earth forces decimated, cities burning, casualties in the millions. "We can't win a straight fight," he finally admitted. "Not with what we have. Not even close." "Then we don't fight straight," Steve said firmly. "We fought the Nazis when everyone said they couldn't be beaten. We won because we were willing to do whatever it took. The Nazis didn't have Star Destroyers, Cap. No, but they had superior technology, better training, and more resources. We still won." Steve turned from the window, his expression resolute. "We need to know what we're fighting." Vader mentioned an emperor, Imperial rule territories. "This isn't just an invasion fleet. This is an established government, which means they have structure, hierarchy, weaknesses." Fury entered the room, his coat billowing dramatically despite the lack of wind. "Good news and bad news. Good news! The World Security Council has authorized full Avengers initiative deployment. Bad news: several nations are already considering Vader's offer. China, Russia, and a dozen smaller countries are discussing cooperation terms." "They can't seriously be considering surrender," Clint protested. "They're considering survival," Fury countered, "and frankly, I don't blame them. But it doesn't matter what governments decide. What matters is what we do in the next 63 hours. He pulled up a new display, a structural schematic of a Star Destroyer that Jarvis had extrapolated from Tony's scans. "Stark, tell me you found something." Tony highlighted a section near the ship's bridge tower. "Maybe. These vessels generate massive energy signatures, but they're not perpetual motion machines. They need fuel, power cores, something. And their shield arrays have gaps, small ones, but they exist. The real problem is getting close enough to exploit them without being vaporized by point defense systems. Thor could do it, Natasha suggested. If we could reach him. Heimdall's not answering, Fury said flatly, which either means Asgard doesn't care or something's preventing communication. Either way, we're on our own. A proximity alarm blared. Agent Hill's voice crackled over the intercom. Director, we have incoming. Multiple signatures breaking atmosphere over New York. Imperial reinforcements. The team rushed to the command center. The main view screen showed a sight that turned Tony's blood cold. Dozens of smaller ships were descending from the Star Destroyer's hangar bays. Landing craft, troop transports, and what looked disturbingly like orbital bombardment platforms. They're not waiting for our answer, Steve realized. They're beginning occupation. 63 hours until the ultimatum expires, Bruce noted quietly. But they're setting up infrastructure now. This isn't psychological warfare anymore. Fury's eye narrowed. Then neither are we. Stark, prep your suits. Rogers, coordinate with military command. Barton, Romanoff. I need reconnaissance on those landing zones. Banner. He paused. Stay ready. We might need the other guys sooner than we'd like. As the team dispersed, Tony caught Steve's arm. You know this is insane, right? We're talking about fighting an interstellar empire with 6 people and some experimental tech. Steve's smile was grim. I've had worse odds. When? Never. But I'm an optimist. The Avengers emergency protocol had never been designed for a crisis of this magnitude. 24 hours after Vader's Times Square demonstration, the team operated from the helicarrier while S.H.I.E.L.D. coordinated global response efforts. But coordination implied organization, and Earth's response was anything but organized. Tony hadn't slept. His lab aboard the helicarrier looked like a tornado had struck a technology convention. Holographic displays overlapped at chaotic angles. Discarded coffee cups littered every surface, and 3 Iron Man suits stood in various states of modification. Jarvis maintained a constant stream of data analysis, processing everything from Imperial ship movements to global news feeds. Boss, you should rest, the AI suggested for the 14th time. I'll rest when we're not staring down extinction, Tony muttered, manipulating a hologram of a stormtrooper's armor. He'd acquired footage from 100 different angles, news cameras, smartphones, security systems. The white plates weren't ceramic or polymer. They were something else entirely, something that absorbed small arms fire and distributed kinetic energy with frightening efficiency. The Mark 42 modifications are complete, Jarvis reported. Repulsor output increased by 37%. But against capital ship armor, I know. We're bringing a knife to a gunfight. Except their guns are the size of buildings. Tony rubbed his eyes. What about the arc reactor readings? Fascinating, actually. The Imperial power signatures don't match any known energy generation method. No fusion, no fission, no antimatter reactions. It's almost as if an explosion rocked the helicarrier. Tony's suit components flew to him instantly, assembling mid-sprint as he raced toward the command center. Jarvis, status. No hull breach. Energy discharge detected 17 miles northeast, Manhattan. The command center was controlled chaos. Fury stood before the main display, his expression carved from granite. Steve and Natasha were already present, with Clint sprinting in from the armory. The view screen showed a crater where a coffee shop in Greenwich Village had stood minutes earlier. Smoke billowed from surrounding buildings. Emergency services were scrambling. What happened? Steve demanded. Agent Hill pulled up tactical footage. Imperial patrol engaged an unknown hostile. Surveillance shows... She paused, rewinding the feed. The video showed stormtroopers marching through Greenwich Village, establishing what looked like a checkpoint. Civilians gave them wide berth, some filming with phones, others hurrying past with heads down. Then, a figure in red and gold, not Tony's armor, something sleeker, had landed in the street, repulsors charging. Who the hell is that? Tony asked. the armored figure opened fire on the stormtroopers. Advanced weapons, professional targeting. 3 white armored soldiers dropped before the others returned fire with their blaster rifles. Blue energy bolts ripped through the air, scorching pavement and shattering windows. The unknown combatant moved like a dancer, evading most shots. But one caught his shoulder and the armor sparked violently. Then the Imperial response escalated. A TIE fighter screamed overhead, its twin ion engines howling. Green energy lanced from its cannons, turning the street into an inferno. The armored figure barely escaped, rocketing skyward with damaged repulsors. The TIE fighter pursued, and the feed ended when orbital fire from the Star Destroyer obliterated the entire block to eliminate the threat. "Someone just declared war on the Empire," Clint observed, without asking us first. "Unauthorized combatant," Fury growled. "Jarvis, did you identify that armor?" Scanning. Negative match to Stark Industries designs. However, the technology appears to be an amalgamation of recovered Chitauri components and Earth-based systems. Sophisticated but crude compared to... "Justin Hammer," Tony interrupted, his voice dangerous. "That's Hammer Industries architecture, or AIM. Someone reverse-engineered my work and mashed it together with alien tech." Natasha's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, her expression darkening. "It's not just New York. Reports coming in from DC and London. Coordinated attacks on Imperial positions. Small teams, heavy weapons, guerrilla tactics." "Who?" Steve asked. "Unknown. But they're organized, and they're serious." She pulled up news footage from Washington. Armored figures, different designs than the New York attacker, ambushed an Imperial walker outside the Pentagon. Rocket launchers, plasma weapons, tech that looked disturbingly advanced. The walker's shields absorbed the assault. Then its massive cannons swiveled and returned fire. The screen went white with the blast. "They're going to get people killed," Steve said quietly. "Escalating like this, the Empire will respond with overwhelming force. They already are." Hill highlighted multiple Imperial ships descending from the Star Destroyers. Troop deployments increasing. They're locking down all 3 cities. Tony's HUD flickered with an incoming encrypted transmission. "I'm getting a call. Source is inside New York, close to the Imperial landing zone." "Don't answer it," Fury warned. Tony answered it anyway. The hologram that materialized showed a man in his 50s wearing expensive body armor covered in corporate logos. His face was familiar from congressional hearings and weapons expo catastrophes. Aldrich Killian smiled like a shark. "Mr. Stark, I was hoping you'd pick up." "Killian." Tony's voice could have frozen nitrogen. "Didn't I kill you? You killed a version of me lacking vision. I've since evolved." Killian's smile widened. "As has AIM. We've been preparing for extraterrestrial threats since the Chitauri invasion. Unlike you, we've been proactive. The Empire is just another hostile force to be neutralized." "You just got 30 people killed in Greenwich Village," Natasha interjected coldly. "Acceptable losses in asymmetric warfare. The Empire responds to force. We're providing force." Killian's expression hardened. SHIELD has been paralyzed by politics. The Avengers have been reactive. AIM has been preparing. We have weapons specifically designed to counter Imperial technology. Weapons we're willing to share, for a price. "We're not interested," Fury stated flatly. "Then you're fools. The Empire will establish martial law within 48 hours. Every government on Earth will capitulate or burn, but we can fight them, bleed them, make occupation too expensive to maintain." Killian leaned forward. "I'm offering an alliance, Stark. AM's resources, Hammer's manufacturing, and several other organizations who understand that survival requires sacrifice." "Organizations like Hydra?" Steve's voice was ice. Killian didn't deny it. "Strange times make strange allies, Captain. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. And right now, the Empire is everyone's enemy. No, Tony said simply, we're not partnering with terrorists. Then you're sentencing Earth to slavery. The Empire negotiates from overwhelming strength. The only language they understand is power. Killian's hologram flickered. You have my number, Stark. When you realize I'm right, and you will, call me. AIM will be ready to do what the Avengers won't. The transmission ended. Silence filled the command center. Finally, Clint spoke. Please tell me we're not actually considering that. We're not, Fury confirmed. But Killian's not wrong about one thing. The Empire responds to strength. They've seen our conventional forces. They've seen our submission. What they haven't seen is the Avengers. Steve straightened. You want us to make a statement? I want you to show Vader that Earth has teeth. That occupation won't be easy. That every block of every city will cost them. Fury pulled up tactical maps of New York. The Empire is establishing command posts. Hit one, hit it hard. Show them we can. And if they retaliate? Bruce asked quietly from the doorway. No one had noticed him enter. Fury met his gaze. Then we hit them harder. Tony studied the maps, calculations running behind his eyes. This is a terrible idea. You have a better one? Give me time, and I might. We don't have time, Steve said. Killian's forcing the issue. If AIM keeps attacking, the Empire will escalate. Civilians will die. We need to control the narrative, show the Empire that legitimate resistance exists, not just terrorists. Tony looked at each team member in turn. Natasha's expression was unreadable. Clint looked resigned. Bruce seemed troubled but determined. Steve radiated quiet conviction.
Fine, Tony sighed. But we do this smart. Surgical strike, in and out, minimal collateral damage. Jarvis, start mapping egress routes. Already done, sir. Fury nodded once. You have 12 hours to plan. Make them count. The Imperial command post had been established in Columbus Circle with brutal efficiency. Within 18 hours of the initial landing, stormtroopers had cordoned off a 3-block radius, displaced thousands of civilians, and erected prefabricated structures that looked disturbingly permanent. ATST Scout Walkers, 2-legged variants smaller than their 4-legged cousins, patrolled the perimeter with mechanical precision. Artillery emplacements crowned rooftops, their barrels pointed skyward in silent threat. And at the center of it all, an Imperial shuttle sat like a predator at rest. Tony studied the live satellite feed from 30,000 feet, the Mark 42 armor's sensors painting the scene in thermal and electromagnetic spectrums. Jarvis, threat assessment. 14 visible stormtroopers, 2 ATST walkers, multiple automated defense turrets. Energy shields protecting the central structure, roughly equivalent to deflecting RPG-class munitions. The shuttle's power core is active, suggesting rapid deployment capability. Translation: they can call in reinforcements fast. Approximately 90 seconds from alert to atmospheric support arrival. Yes. Steve's voice crackled over the comm. Iron Man, status? I've got eyes on target. Everything Fury promised, plus some nasty surprises. Tony marked 3 additional gun emplacements Jarvis had identified. Those aren't anti-personnel weapons. Those are anti-armor. Probably saw footage of the Hulk from the Chitauri invasion. They're expecting us, Natasha observed from her position 2 blocks south. She crouched on a fire escape, watching stormtrooper patrol patterns through a high-powered scope. Patrol routes overlap every 45 seconds. No gaps, no blind spots. Whoever designed this knew what they were doing. Military doctrine, Steve confirmed. He was street level, disguised in civilian clothes, mapping foot traffic. The Empire hadn't imposed curfew yet, but New Yorkers gave the command post wide berth. These aren't just soldiers, they're occupation specialists. Clint's voice joined the channel. I count 6 sniper positions on surrounding buildings. Not stormtroopers, locals, NYPD maybe, or National Guard. They're watching the Empire watching us. Great, Tony muttered. Friendly fire concerns. Fury, you getting this? From the helicarrier, Fury's response was clipped. Confirmed. Local forces have orders not to engage unless civilians are threatened. You're clear to proceed. Define clear, Bruce said quietly. He was positioned in a shield transport 3 blocks north, the Hulk held in check by breathing exercises and sheer willpower. Because if those walkers start shooting into crowds, then you stop them, Steve said firmly. That's why you're here, Bruce. Not as a first option, but as insurance. Tony descended to rooftop level, activating stealth systems that bent light around the armor. Not invisibility, but close enough. Okay, team. Remember, this is a demonstration, not an extermination. We hit fast, disable their hardware, and extract before orbital support arrives. No heroic last stands. Since when do you advocate for caution? Natasha asked, a hint of amusement in her voice. Since I saw what a Star Destroyer's turbo lasers can do to city blocks. Cap, you're up. Steve Rogers walked toward the Imperial perimeter with his hands visible and empty. Stormtroopers immediately trained weapons on him, their movements synchronized like a disturbed hive. One stepped forward, vocoder distorting his voice. This area is restricted. Disperse immediately or be detained. I'm looking for Lord Vader, Steve said calmly. I have a message for him. All communications are processed through official Imperial channels. Tell him Captain America wants to discuss his surrender terms, face to face. The stormtrooper hesitated. Steve could almost hear the internal deliberation, the calm chatter as they contacted superiors. The hesitation lasted exactly 3 seconds before the soldier raised his blaster rifle. You will disperse now, or Steve's shield appeared from beneath his jacket in a blur of red, white, and blue. The vibranium disc deflected the first blaster bolt into the sky, ricocheted off a second trooper's chest plate, and returned to Steve's hand before the third shot was fired. Then, Natasha was among them, Widow's bite gauntlets crackling with electricity as she disabled weapons and armor systems with surgical precision. Alarms shrieked. The AT-ST walkers lurched into motion, their chin-mounted cannons swiveling toward the threat. That's when Tony dropped stealth and opened fire. Repulsor beams lanced through the night, not at stormtroopers, but at the walkers' leg joints. Jarvis had identified the hydraulic systems as potential weak points, and Tony's upgraded output proved sufficient. The first walker's knee joint exploded in a shower of sparks and metal. The machine collapsed sideways, its pilot ejecting before the cockpit hit pavement. The second walker was more problematic. It adjusted fire immediately, green energy bolts tracking Tony's flight path with unnerving accuracy. He juked left, then right, the Mark 42's enhanced maneuverability, keeping him microseconds ahead of lethal fire. These guys don't miss. Imperial training, Steve grunted, using his shield to protect a group of civilians who'd been too slow to evacuate. Clint, we need those roof positions neutralized. On it! Explosive arrows streaked from Clint's position, detonating with precision against the automated turrets. Secondary explosions lit up the Columbus Circle skyline as ammunition cooked off. But for every emplacement Clint destroyed, stormtroopers below adapted, creating overlapping fields of fire that turned the street into a kill zone. Natasha dragged a wounded civilian behind cover, a young woman who'd been caught in crossfire. We've got casualties. Where's our extraction? 30 seconds! Agent Hill's voice over comms. Shield transport inbound. Then everything changed. The air itself seemed to thicken, pressure building like an approaching thunderstorm. Stormtroopers suddenly retreated in perfect formation, creating a corridor. The Imperial shuttle's boarding ramp descended, and a figure emerged, wreathed in darkness. Darth Vader walked into the battle zone like a man entering his own throne room. Steve felt it immediately, a presence that had nothing to do with physical threat and everything to do with primal, instinctive fear. This was wrongness given form, malevolence that didn't need weapons because it was a weapon. Avengers, we've got... Vader raised one hand. Steve's shield tore itself from his grip, flying through the air to hover before the Dark Lord. Vader examined it almost curiously, tilting his helmet. Vibranium, impressive. Your world has resources of value. Give it back. Steve's voice was steady despite every instinct screaming to run. No. Vader crushed the shield, not with his hand, but with visible effort of will. The indestructible disc groaned, its atomic structure protesting impossible forces. It didn't break, but it deformed, warping into a useless curve before Vader released it. The shield clattered to the ground, ruined. Tony's targeting systems locked onto Vader. Every weapon system charged simultaneously. Big mistake, Buckethead. He fired everything. Repulsors, missiles, the Mark 42's entire arsenal converged on Vader in a display of firepower that would have leveled a building. The explosions were magnificent, fire and smoke consuming the entire street. For 3 seconds, Tony allowed himself hope. Then Vader walked through the inferno, completely unharmed. His lightsaber ignited with a snap hiss that cut through the chaos, a blade of crimson energy that seemed to drink light rather than emit it. "Your weapons are impressive for primitives," Vader observed, his mechanical breathing somehow audible over the battle, but inadequate. He moved with impossible speed for someone his size. The lightsaber carved through Tony's missile barrage mid-flight, detonating ordnance prematurely. When Tony tried to close distance for a repulsor punch, Vader simply gestured and the Iron Man armor froze mid-air, servos screaming as they fought against invisible restraints. "Jarvis, full power, override safeties." "Attempting, sir." External force preventing, Vader clenched his fist. Every joint in the Mark 42 began compressing simultaneously, armor plates grinding against each other. Tony felt ribs protest, heard metal shriek. The HUD went red with warnings as structural integrity dropped to critical levels. "Tony!" Steve charged, retrieving his warped shield. It wouldn't protect anymore, but it could still hit. Vader didn't even look. His other hand extended and Steve simply stopped. Lifted off the ground, clawing at his throat as invisible pressure closed around his windpipe. Courage is admirable, but ultimately futile. "Put him down!" Natasha's voice was cold fury as she fired her entire clip at Vader's head. The bullet stopped inches from his mask, suspended in midair like Tony's earlier demonstration, then clattered harmlessly to the ground. Vader turned his helmet toward her, and even through the mask, his contempt was palpable. "You resist the inevitable. The Empire's dominion cannot be challenged by—" A roar shook the street. Bruce Banner was gone. In his place stood 8 feet of green rage, muscles bulging with barely controlled fury. The Hulk's eyes locked onto Vader with primal recognition. Threat. Vader released Steve and Tony, his attention focusing entirely on the Hulk. For the first time, his voice carried something other than confident superiority. Interest. Fascinating. The Hulk didn't posture, didn't roar again. He simply launched himself at Vader with the force of a living missile, fists raised to pulverize the Dark Lord into the pavement. Vader caught him midair. Not physically. The Sith Lord's hands remained at his sides, lightsaber held loosely in one gloved fist, but the Hulk stopped as if he'd hit an invisible wall, suspended 15 feet above the street, legs kicking uselessly against nothing. The green giant thrashed, muscles straining against restraints that existed only in the Force, and for 3 seconds, Vader held him effortlessly. Then the Hulk roared, and the restraint shattered. Vader actually stepped backward, half a step, but movement nonetheless. The Force wasn't accustomed to being defied by sheer rage. The Hulk crashed down, cratering the asphalt, and swung a haymaker that would have decapitated a normal human. The lightsaber came up in a defensive arc, crimson blade meeting green fist. Energy sizzled against skin that had withstood artillery fire. The Hulk jerked back, more surprised than hurt, staring at the shallow burn across his knuckles. The wound was already healing, flesh knitting back together in real time, but the damage had been done. Something had hurt him. Hulk smash laser sword! Tony, freed from Vader's grip, crashed to the ground in a tangle of sparking armor. Jarvis, damage report. Structural integrity at 43%. Repulsor systems compromised. Arc reactor stable, but boss, the Hulk just punched a lightsaber. I noticed. Tony struggled upright, watching the impossible fight unfold. Vader moved with precision that belonged in a fencing manual, each lightsaber strike calculated to redirect rather than resist the Hulk's overwhelming strength. But the Hulk was learning, adapting his attacks, using debris as projectiles, forcing Vader to divide his attention between offense and defense. Steve had collapsed nearby, gasping for air, his neck already bruising from Vader's force choke. Natasha dragged him behind an overturned car as stormtroopers regrouped, their disciplined formations re-establishing firing lines. "We need to extract now." "Not without Bruce." Steve wheezed. "Bruce is winning!" Clint called from his rooftop position, and he wasn't wrong. The Hulk had grabbed a fire hydrant, still attached to its foundation, and swung the entire concrete block like a club. Vader deflected with the force, but the hydrant exploded on contact, sending a geyser of water skyward. The distraction lasted half a second, enough for the Hulk to close distance and deliver a thunderous punch that connected with Vader's armored chest. The Dark Lord flew backward 30 feet, crashing through the Imperial shuttle's boarding ramp. Metal shrieked, alarms blared. For the first time since arriving on Earth, Vader sounded strained. "Impressive. Your rage gives you strength, but rage is merely passion without discipline." He emerged from the wreckage, cape tattered, but otherwise unharmed. His lightsaber had extinguished during the impact. He didn't reignite it. Instead, both hands rose, and the Hulk suddenly found himself fighting gravity itself. Vader lifted him, all 1,400 pounds of muscle and fury, 20 feet into the air, then slammed him down with geological force. The street cratered. Car alarms screamed. Windows shattered for 3 blocks. The Hulk groaned, dazed, and Vader lifted him again. "No!" Tony fired his remaining functional repulsor, the beam striking Vader's shoulder. It did nothing, but it got attention. "Pick on someone your own size, Darth Bathrobe." Vader turned, releasing the Hulk, and Tony suddenly understood what Steve had felt. Invisible hands closing around his throat, cutting off air, crushing windpipe. The HUD went red. Jarvis screamed warnings. Tony clawed at his neck, forgetting the armor separated him from Vader's grip by 6 inches of titanium alloy. Didn't matter. The Force didn't care about armor. "Your technology cannot save you," Vader stated, walking slowly toward Tony's suspended form. "Your strength means nothing. Your world will kneel before the Empire, or it will burn. This demonstration changes nothing." Through dimming vision, Tony saw the Hulk rising behind Vader, shaking off the impact that would have killed anything else. Saw Steve struggling to stand, shield useless but determination absolute. Saw Natasha calculating angles, Clint knocking another arrow, both knowing their weapons were inadequate but refusing to stop. Saw Earth's mightiest heroes about to die because they'd challenged a power beyond comprehension. Then the sky tore open with thunder. Lightning struck Columbus Circle with the force of divine judgment. Not from the Star Destroyer, from above, from atmosphere itself, a column of electrical fury that sent stormtroopers flying and forced Vader to release Tony, both hands rising to shield against the onslaught. The energy didn't harm him, but it disrupted his concentration long enough for Tony to fall, gasping. And through the dissipating electricity walked Thor, Mjolnir crackling with residual charge, his expression carved from stone, an ancient rage. "I heard there were invaders," the God of Thunder announced, his voice carrying across the devastated street. "I apologize for my tardiness. It took time to convince Heimdall that Midgard's troubles warranted Asgard's attention." His eyes found Vader, and lightning danced across his shoulders. "But now that I'm here, perhaps we should discuss your surrender terms." Vader's helmet tilted, assessing this new variable. "Another champion. Your world has surprising resilience. This world is under Asgard's protection," Thor stated flatly. "You will withdraw your forces, or I will introduce you to the full measure of a lightning storm." For 3 seconds, Vader was silent. Then, "The Empire does not negotiate with gods." "Then, we have nothing more to discuss." Thor moved first, Mjolnir spinning at impossible speeds as he crossed the distance between them in a blur. Vader's lightsaber ignited mid-swing, meeting the hammer's arc with a collision that sent shockwaves through nearby buildings. Lightning met plasma. Asgardian enchantment met Sith alchemy. 2 warriors from civilizations separated by galaxies and philosophies clashed in the heart of New York City, and the street couldn't contain their battle. They rose into the air, Thor flying, Vader levitating through force manipulation, trading blows that lit up the night sky. Each impact was a thunderclap. Each deflection sent energy cascading through the darkness. The Avengers could only watch, stunned, as a god fought a Sith Lord above Manhattan. "Okay," Tony said, his voice damaged but functional. "Okay, that's actually pretty even." Steve pulled himself upright, watching Mjolnir deflect lightsaber strikes that should have been impossible to predict. Thor's faster, but Vader's adapting. He was right. Vader couldn't match Thor's raw speed, but he didn't need to. The Force provided precognition, allowing him to position defensively, to redirect rather than block, to exploit openings the moment they appeared. When Thor overextended on a particularly aggressive strike, Vader's counterattack was surgical, a force push that sent the Asgardian tumbling through the air. Thor recovered instantly, lightning surging from the sky to his call, channeling enough voltage to power a city. The bolt struck Vader directly, and for the first time, the Dark Lord's mechanical breathing stuttered. His armor smoked, but he remained airborne, lightsaber still ignited. "You are powerful," Vader acknowledged, "but power alone is insufficient. You lack discipline, control. The Force grants me." "The Force?" Thor's laugh was bitter. "I am the son of Odin, Prince of Asgard, and I have fought beings your Force cannot comprehend. You are skilled sorcerer, but you are not a god." He hurled Mjolnir with the full force of his divine strength. Vader tried to catch it with the Force, tried to stop its momentum, redirect its path, anything. The hammer didn't care. It struck him in the chest with the sound of a collapsing building, and the Dark Lord plummeted from the sky, crashing through 2 abandoned cars before slamming into the Imperial shuttle's hull. Thor recalled Mjolnir, the hammer flying back to his hand as he descended. "Stay down, Vader. This need not end in your destruction." Vader rose, slowly. His armor was dented, cape shredded, but his breathing remained mechanical and steady. "You have made a grave mistake, Asgardian." He looked up, not at Thor, at the Star Destroyer hanging above Manhattan. "All forces," Vader's voice transmitted across Imperial frequencies, his words echoing from every stormtrooper helmet, every ship speaker. "Level the target zone, no survivors." The Star Destroyer's turbo lasers began charging, their glow visible even from the ground. Enough firepower to glass 20 city blocks, to kill millions. Thor, the Avengers, and everyone within a square mile. "No," Steve breathed. Tony's voice was hollow. "He's actually going to do it." And above Manhattan, the night began to glow with the promise of orbital fire. The Star Destroyer's ventral cannons glowed brighter, energy coils cycling to full power. Civilians still trapped in the evacuation zone looked up in horror, understanding on an instinctive level that death approached from the sky. Shield sensors detected the energy spike immediately, enough concentrated power to vaporize everything within a half-mile radius. "Evacuate!" Steve shouted, though there was nowhere to run, no time to escape. Tony's HUD calculated trajectories, blast radius, casualties. The numbers made his stomach turn. "Jarvis, can we—" "Negative, sir. No countermeasure available." Thor raised Mjolnir skyward, lightning gathering in dark clouds that hadn't existed seconds before. "I can disperse the energy, but I need time." "Time we don't have," Natasha said quietly, watching the countdown on her display. 40 seconds until the Star Destroyer fired. The Hulk roared defiance at the sky, but even rage couldn't punch through orbital bombardment. Then Fury's voice crackled across all Avengers frequencies, calm despite the apocalypse descending. "Thor, stand down. We're handling this." "How?" Steve demanded. "Unless you've got a Death Star in your pocket." "Something better. Stark, your old man left us blueprints. Said humanity would need them eventually." There was grim satisfaction in Fury's tone. Turns out he was right. From 3 different positions around New York, energy signatures bloomed that made Tony's arc reactor look like a flashlight. Massive installations rose from underground shield facilities, sleek towers that hummed with barely contained power, their cores glowing with the distinctive blue of arc reactor technology scaled up to building-sized proportions. "Dad built those?" Tony whispered. "Howard called them Jericho stations, planetary defense platforms. Been dormant for 40 years, waiting for this exact scenario." Fury's voice hardened. "Firing solutions locked. Vader, I strongly suggest you cancel that order." The Star Destroyer's weapons continued charging. Vader's breathing echoed across the street, mechanical and unmoved. "Your weapons cannot penetrate Imperial shields. Let's test that theory." The Jericho stations fired simultaneously. 3 columns of concentrated energy, pure directed power drawn from arc reactors that Tony's father had hidden beneath New York decades ago, lanced upward at the speed of light. They struck the Star Destroyer's ventral shields in a confluence of destructive force that turned night into day. The shields held for exactly 2.3 seconds before collapsing under sustained bombardment. The beams punched through the warship's armored hull, coursing through deck after deck, venting atmosphere and sparks into the void. Alarms shrieked aboard the massive vessel. The turbo laser's charging sequence aborted as power diverted to damage control. Secondary explosions rippled across the Star Destroyer's underside. The orbital bombardment never came. Vader stood motionless, watching his flagship hemorrhage fire. When he spoke, his voice carried an edge of something almost like respect. Impressive. Your world has hidden depths. You have no idea, Fury replied. Now call off your fleet, or we keep shooting until there's nothing left but scrap metal. For 5 seconds, Vader said nothing. The Avengers tensed, weapons ready despite their inadequacy. Thor's lightning continued to dance across his shoulders. The Hulk growled low in his throat. Tony's targeting systems locked onto Vader's center mass, knowing it wouldn't matter, but refusing to stand defenseless. Then Vader spoke 2 words into his comm. Ceasefire. The Star Destroyer's weapons powered down. Stormtroopers lowered their blasters. The AT-ST walkers ceased their targeting locks. Across New York, London, and Washington, D.C., Imperial forces simultaneously stood down from combat readiness. Withdraw to command posts, Vader ordered. Establish defensive perimeter only. No aggressive action without direct authorization. He turned to face the Avengers, his damaged armor smoking slightly. This changes nothing. You have demonstrated capability, but not superiority.
The Emperor's ultimatum stands. He consulted an internal chronometer. 41 hours. Earth will submit to Imperial authority, or face the full might of our armada. 3 Star Destroyers isn't an armada, Tony shot back, trying to sound more confident than he felt. 3 Star Destroyers is a reconnaissance force. Vader's breathing punctuated the statement. You fought well today. You survived, which is more than most worlds achieve against the Empire, but survival is not victory. He raised one hand, and the Imperial shuttle, damaged but functional, rose from the wreckage through telekinetic force alone. The boarding ramp extended. I will report to the Emperor that Earth possesses unexpected defensive capabilities. He will adjust our approach accordingly. Whether that adjustment comes in the form of negotiation or annihilation depends on choices your leaders make. Vader began walking toward the shuttle, stormtroopers falling into formation around him. He paused at the ramp, looking back at Thor. You are formidable as Guardian, but you are one. The Empire commands millions. Even gods can be overwhelmed by numbers. Then bring your millions, Thor replied, lightning crackling. I will introduce them to thunder. Vader's helmet tilted slightly, perhaps acknowledgement, perhaps contempt. Then he boarded, and the shuttle lifted off, ascending toward the wounded Star Destroyer with surprising grace. Silence fell over Columbus Circle, the kind of silence that follows near-death experiences when adrenaline fades and reality settles in. Steve collapsed against a destroyed car, his shield, warped and useless, clutched in shaking hands. Natasha checked on wounded civilians who'd been caught in the crossfire. Clint descended from his perch, quiver empty, expression grim. The Hulk stood in the center of the crater he'd created, breathing heavily, green skin showing multiple burn marks from Vader's lightsaber. As Tony watched, the rage began to fade. Muscles contracted, skin tone shifted from green to pink. Banner collapsed to his knees, naked and shivering, and Natasha was already there with a thermal blanket from the shield transport. Thor landed beside Tony, Mjolnir resting heavily in his hand. That sorcerer is dangerous. His power is unlike anything I have encountered. It is not magic as Asgard knows it, yet it bends reality with similar effect. The Force, Tony muttered, pulling up footage his armor had recorded. He called it the Force, some kind of telekinesis, precognition, and general space wizard nonsense. He replayed Vader catching the Hulk mid-air, crushing his shield, stopping bullets. Jarvis analysis? Insufficient data to form comprehensive theory. However, Vader's abilities appear to operate on principles outside conventional physics. Possibly quantum manipulation, possibly something entirely unknown. Magic. It's magic. I prefer science we don't understand yet, sir. Steve approached, moving like a man 3 times his age. His neck was purple and swollen. We got lucky. If Fury hadn't had those defense platforms, we'd be ash, Clint finished bluntly, along with half of Manhattan. The platforms won't work again, Fury said over comms, his tone matter-of-fact. They were one-shot weapons. Took everything they had to punch through those shields. We're dry. Tony felt ice in his stomach. So if Vader decides to bombard us anyway, then we die, but he won't. Not yet. Fury sounded exhausted but certain. He's military, not stupid. We proved Earth can fight back. That makes us valuable, either as allies or as a threat that needs careful elimination. Either way, we've bought time. 41 hours, Natasha said quietly, helping Bruce to his feet. The physicist looked haunted, staring at the destruction around them. That's not enough time to build more weapons. No, Steve agreed, but it's enough time to make a choice. Thor frowned. What choice? Steve's expression was carved from granite and old wars. Whether we keep fighting or whether we surrender. We don't surrender, Tony said immediately. Even if fighting means they glass the planet? Bruce's voice was soft but sharp. I just fought a man who caught the Hulk like he was a baseball, and he's not even their leader. Tony, we're talking about an interstellar empire. They have technology centuries beyond ours, armies numbered in millions, and a leader who apparently rules entire galaxies. So we give up? Just roll over? I'm saying we need to be smart, Bruce replied. The Chitauri were mindless. We could beat them with tactics and courage. But the Empire, they're organized, disciplined, and they've done this before. To how many other worlds? Hundreds? Thousands? Bruce is right, Natasha said quietly. This isn't a fight we can win conventionally. Then we win unconventionally, Steve said. We've done it before. Smaller force against superior enemy. That's not new. The Nazis had better equipment, more soldiers, industrial superiority. We still won. The Nazis didn't have orbital bombardment capabilities, Clint pointed out. No, but they had concentration camps, genocide, and the will to burn the world rather than lose it. Steve looked at each team member in turn. The Empire is the same thing, just bigger, and we don't negotiate with fascists. We fight them, no matter the cost. A long silence fell. Finally, Tony sighed. I really hate it when you're right. Which is why you hate me often, Steve said with a ghost of a smile. Thor raised Mjolnir. Then we fight. Asgard stands with Midgard. Shield stands ready, Fury confirmed. One by one, the Avengers nodded, exhausted, wounded, facing impossible odds, but together. Above them, the wounded Star Destroyer retreated to high orbit, its running lights disappearing into darkness. But everyone knew it was still there, watching, waiting. The clock was ticking. The helicarrier's medical bay was standing room only. Bruce Banner sat on an examination table, wrapped in a Shield-issue jumpsuit, while doctors checked him for injuries that had already healed. Thor stood by the observation window, watching New York's skyline where smoke still rose from Columbus Circle. Steve received treatment for his crushed throat. Medical staff kept insisting he needed rest, and he kept ignoring them. Natasha and Clint debriefed with Hill, their voices low and urgent. Tony had retreated to his lab, armor scattered in pieces across the floor. The Mark 42 was scrap. 30% of its systems were permanently damaged, and the rest would require weeks of rebuilding. He He stood before a holographic display showing 3 star destroyers in high orbit, their energy signatures pulsing like malevolent heartbeats. Jarvis, status on the Jericho stations? Offline, sir. Power cores depleted. As Director Fury indicated, they were single-use weapons. Rebuilding would require arc reactor technology we don't currently have in sufficient quantity. Then we build more reactors. In 40 hours? Sir, even with automated fabrication, we're looking at a minimum of... I know the math, Jarvis. I'm trying to think past it. Tony pulled up schematics of the Star Destroyer Jarvis had compiled from sensor data. The vessels were engineering marvels, hyperdrive systems that somehow exceeded light speed, shields that could absorb nuclear-level impacts, weapons powered by reactors that made his arc technology look primitive. These ships aren't just advanced. They're from a completely different technological paradigm. Different physics, maybe. The Force appears to operate outside conventional scientific understanding, Jarvis agreed. Vader's abilities suggest either highly advanced technology indistinguishable from supernatural phenomena or actual manipulation of universal constants. Which means we can't out-tech them. Not in 2 days, probably not in 2 years. Tony rubbed his eyes. So what do? We can't fight them straight up. We can't outbuild them. Thor's powerful, but Vader held his own, and Vader's just one guy in an empire of millions. Perhaps the solution isn't military, sir. Tony looked up at the ceiling-mounted speakers. Did you just suggest diplomacy? I'm suggesting unconventional warfare. The Empire is accustomed to overwhelming force and submission. What they're not accustomed to, based on Vader's reactions, is persistent resistance from a unified population. You want us to become insurgents. I want us to survive, sir, and survival may require adaptation. Before Tony could respond, Fury's voice crackled over the intercom. Stark, conference room. 5 minutes. We have a situation. We have several situations. This one's different. Move. The conference room was packed. Not just Avengers, but representatives from the World Security Council, military brass from a dozen nations, and faces Tony recognized from intelligence agencies he wasn't supposed to know about. The tension was thick enough to cut. Fury stood at the head of the table, his expression graver than Tony had ever seen. 18 minutes ago, we received a communication, not from Vader, from someone claiming to represent opposition to the Empire. A hologram materialized. A woman in elegant white robes, her hair styled in an elaborate crown braid. She looked young, early 20s maybe, but her eyes carried the weight of someone much older. People of Earth, she began, her voice calm despite obvious urgency. My name is Leia Organa, Princess of Alderaan and Senator in the Imperial Senate. I'm contacting you from the Outer Rim territories at great personal risk. Steve leaned forward. The Outer Rim. Is that their galaxy? Thor confirmed quietly. She's transmitting from Star Wars space. Leia continued. Your world has appeared on Imperial charts, and Emperor Palpatine has dispatched reconnaissance forces under Lord Vader. I've monitored the initial contact, and I must warn you, the Empire does not negotiate in good faith. Surrender means subjugation. Entire planets have been enslaved, their resources stripped, their populations conscripted or eliminated. Alderaan maintains diplomatic relations, but we live under constant threat. She paused, glancing off-screen as if checking for pursuers. However, there is hope. A growing alliance of systems resists Imperial rule. We call ourselves the Rebel Alliance. We're few, scattered, and constantly hunted. But we've learned to fight the Empire using tactics they cannot counter with brute force. Intelligence networks, surgical strikes, and leveraging their own bureaucracy against them. Natasha's eyes narrowed. She's recruiting us. Your world possesses something unique, Leia continued. You've never known the Empire's dominion, Your people are unified by shared resistance rather than divided by conquered territories. And based on reports I've received, you've already bloodied Vader's nose, something few can claim. A slight smile crossed her face. I'm transmitting data on Imperial protocols, ship schematics, and tactical weaknesses. It's not much, but it's everything we've learned fighting them for years. The hologram flickered. I cannot send military support. We lack the resources. But if Earth joins the Rebel Alliance, you won't stand alone. We can coordinate resistance, share intelligence, and perhaps... She looked directly into the camera, into the future, into hope. Together, we can show the galaxy that the Empire can be defeated. The transmission ended. Silence filled the room until one of the World Security Council representatives, a gray-haired woman from China, spoke. This is a trap, obviously. The Empire sends us propaganda designed to encourage futile resistance while they prepare overwhelming force. Or it's legitimate, argued her British counterpart. A resistance movement trying to find allies. Either way, it's irrelevant, said the American representative. We don't have the capability to join an intergalactic rebellion. We can barely defend our own planet. Fury pulled up the data Leia had transmitted. Schematics flooded the displays, Star Destroyer layouts, TIE fighter weaknesses, Imperial communication protocols, even details on Vader's armor and capabilities. This intelligence is detailed, specific. It's either real or someone spent considerable effort making it look real. Tony was already analyzing the schematics, his mind racing. Jarvis, cross-reference this data with our sensor readings from the battle. Comparing. Sir, the Star Destroyer schematic matches our observations with 94% accuracy. The TIE fighter specifications explain the maneuverability patterns we recorded. This data appears genuine. So we have blueprints, Clint said. That doesn't give us ships or weapons. No, but it gives us targets. Steve studied the Star Destroyer layout, his tactical mind already working. Power distribution nodes, shield generators, hangar bay vulnerabilities. If we can get inside one of these ships... That's suicide, Bruce interrupted. We barely survived fighting Vader on the ground. You want to board his flagship? I want to hurt them, Steve replied flatly. They think we're primitives. They think we'll roll over. Every hour we prove them wrong is another hour humanity survives. Thor nodded slowly. There is wisdom in this. The Empire expects submission or annihilation. They do not expect cleverness, guile, the kind of warfare that Midgardians have perfected. Guerrilla tactics, Natasha said. Hit and run. Make occupation so costly they reconsider. Exactly. Steve looked to Fury. Can we contact this Princess Leia? Coordinate with her rebel alliance? Working on it, Hill interjected, fingers flying across her console. The transmission included encrypted comm protocols. If we can boost our signal through... She paused, eyes widening. We're receiving another transmission, not from Leia, from Earth. Multiple sources. The displays changed, showing video feeds from around the world. Aldrich Killian's face appeared on one screen, addressing AM operatives. On another, a man Tony recognized as Helmut Zemo coordinated with what looked like military deserters. A third showed someone in a Black Panther suit, not T'Challa, someone older, mobilizing Wakandan forces. They're organizing, Fury said quietly. Without our permission, without coordination. The Empire's threat has united every faction on Earth, legitimate and criminal, hero and villain. United against a common enemy, Steve murmured, just like we did against the Nazis. Or united to make things worse, Tony countered. Killian's a terrorist, Zemo's a fanatic. If they start hitting Imperial targets without strategy, an explosion cut him off. Not aboard the helicarrier, in London. The feed showed an Imperial command post erupting in flames. ATST walkers toppling as coordinated strikes hit their leg joints. The attack was professional, brutal, and over in 90 seconds. Vader's voice transmitted globally seconds later. For every Imperial casualty, one Earth city block will be sterilized. Choose your resistance carefully. Another screen showed Washington, D.C., a residential neighborhood. The Star Destroyer's turbo lasers fired once, a single surgical strike that vaporized 6 blocks in emerald fire. 10,000 people died in 2 seconds. The conference room went silent. Someone was crying, one of the junior SHIELD agents. Someone else was praying. Tony felt bile rise in his throat. "They just killed civilians," Bruce whispered. "Deliberately, as punishment." "Collective punishment," Steve said, his voice hollow. "The Nazis did the same thing. 10 civilians executed for every German soldier killed by partisans." Fury's face was stone. "This is what we're fighting. This is what surrender looks like. Obey or watch your neighbors die. Then we make them pay," Thor growled, lightning dancing across his fingers. "For every innocent life taken." "We can't retaliate," Natasha interrupted. "That's what they want. Escalation gives them justification for genocide." "So we do nothing?" Clint demanded. "We do something smart," Tony said slowly, an idea forming. "They expect military resistance. They're prepared for that. But what if we hit them where they're not prepared?" Everyone looked at him. Tony pulled up Leia's data, highlighting the Imperial communication network. They're an empire. They have bureaucracy, supply chains, command structures. Jarvis, if we hacked their systems, not to fight, but to spy, to disrupt, to make them question every order, could we? With Princess Leia's protocols? Possibly. It would require significant resources and do it. Pull every hacker SHIELD has, every tech genius. I don't care if they're criminals or saints. Tony looked at Fury. "We can't beat them with force, but maybe we can beat them with chaos." Fury's smile was predatory. "I'll make the calls." The cyber warfare initiative began within hours, but the Empire's retaliation for London forced an uncomfortable reality. Every aggressive action invited overwhelming response. SHIELD established a covert operations center 300 feet below Stark Tower, its servers isolated from any network the Empire could trace. Tony called in favors from contacts he'd never admit to having. Hackers from Anonymous, programmers from Silicon Valley, even a few reformed cyber criminals who saw the Empire as an existential threat worth temporarily becoming heroes for. But while Earth's brightest minds worked to crack Imperial encryption, the clock continued its inexorable countdown. 28 hours until Vader's ultimatum expired, and the Emperor had other plans. The transmission arrived simultaneously at every government capital, broadcast on every frequency, displayed on every screen capable of receiving it. Not Vader this time. The figure who appeared was elderly, draped in dark robes, his face weathered by age and something darker, malevolence that transcended mere cruelty. Emperor Palpatine smiled like a grandfather greeting wayward children. "People of Earth." His voice was soft, almost kind. But underneath lurked something that made instincts scream warnings. "I am Emperor Palpatine, sovereign of the Galactic Empire. Lord Vader has reported your spirited resistance. I find it admirable, if misguided." His hands folded before him, gnarled fingers steepling. "You fight because you fear subjugation. You resist because you value freedom. These are noble sentiments. But they are also childish. Freedom without order is chaos. Independence without strength is vulnerability. The galaxy is vast and dangerous, full of threats you cannot imagine. The Empire offers protection, stability, a place within a civilization spanning millions of worlds." The smile widened, revealing teeth. "I am not unreasonable. I recognize that your world possesses unique qualities. Ingenuity, determination, warriors of considerable skill. Lord Vader himself was impressed by your Asgardian champion and the Green Beast. Such assets should not be wasted. Tony watched from the command center, his jaw tight. He's pivoting from threats to offers. Negotiation through another vector, Natasha agreed. When force fails, try seduction. Palpatine continued. Therefore, I propose an alternative to conquest. Join the Empire willingly. Retain your planetary government, your cultures, your way of life, under Imperial oversight naturally. In exchange, you will have access to galactic trade routes, advanced technology, and the full protection of the Imperial fleet. Your world will prosper beyond your greatest imaginings. He paused, letting the offer sink in. Consider this carefully. Lord Vader will return in... He consulted something off-screen. 27 hours for your final answer. Choose wisdom over pride. Choose survival over meaningless defiance. The transmission ended, but the damage was done. Within minutes, the World Security Council was in chaos. Representatives argued over secure channels that SHIELD monitored with Fury's authorization. China's delegate advocated immediate acceptance. Russia's representative demanded guarantees of sovereignty. The American delegate wanted military analysis of Imperial trustworthiness. They're fracturing, Hill reported, listening to the intercepts. Half the Security Council wants to accept. The other half wants assurances we can't possibly verify. Divide and conquer, Steve said bitterly. Classic strategy. Offer just enough to make surrender look reasonable. Thor's expression was dark. I have seen this Emperor's kind before. On Svartalfheim, on Jotunheim. Promises of prosperity, of peace. All lies designed to lower defenses before the true subjugation begins. Can you prove that? Bruce asked. Because right now a lot of people are hearing join voluntarily and nothing changes versus fight and millions die. From their perspective, the Empire's offer sounds preferable to extinction. It's not real, Tony insisted, pulling up Leia's intelligence. Look at these reports she sent. Worlds that joined willingly. Within a generation, they're stripped of resources, their populations conscripted, their governments replaced by Imperial governors. It's a scam. Then we need to show people that, Natasha said. Leia's data is detailed, but it's text files and technical readouts. People don't respond to data. They respond to stories. Tony understood immediately. We need testimony, witnesses, someone from their galaxy who can tell Earth what Imperial rule actually means. We have Princess Leia's recording, Hill began. Not enough. She's opposition, people will assume bias. We need someone unexpected. Tony's fingers flew across his interface. Jarvis, can we boost our signal to contact Leia in real time? Attempting. The transmission lag is significant, approximately 7 hours for round-trip communication given the distances involved and the relay protocols. However, I can send a message. Do it. Ask if she knows anyone in Imperial-controlled territory willing to testify about conditions under Palpatine's rule. Someone credible. A former Imperial officer would be ideal. While Jarvis worked on the communication, Fury addressed the team. Even if we get testimony, it won't convince everyone. Some nations will accept the Empire's offer regardless. We need to assume Earth's response will be divided. Then we plan for that scenario, Steve said. Some nations submit, others resist. The Empire occupies cooperative territories, and we launch resistance operations from the holdouts. Civil war, Bruce said quietly. We're talking about humanity fighting itself while also fighting the Empire. We're talking about survival, Steve corrected. If half of Earth surrenders and the other half fights, the half that surrenders becomes strategic targets. Infrastructure, resources, staging grounds. We'd have to sabotage our own cities to deny them to the Empire. That's monstrous, one of the junior SHIELD agents protested. That's war, Steve replied, his voice hard with old memories. And it's better than total capitulation. An alert interrupted the debate. Hill pulled up a new feed. We have movement. Imperial forces are withdrawing from all 3 cities. The displays showed stormtroopers boarding transports, ATST walkers being airlifted back to Star Destroyers, command posts being rapidly dismantled. Within 20 minutes, every Imperial ground unit had evacuated Manhattan, Washington, D.C., and London, retreating to their vessels in high orbit. What are they doing? Clint wondered. Tony's eyes narrowed. They're removing targets. No ground presence means we can't hit them without orbital weapons, which we don't have anymore. It also means no immediate threat, Thor observed. They're demonstrating good faith, backing off to give humanity space to consider Palpatine's offer. Psychological warfare, Natasha agreed. Aggression failed, so now they're being magnanimous. See? We're not conquerors, we're neighbors. Fury's expression was calculating. Or they're clearing the board for something bigger. Jarvis, sensors. The Star Destroyers remain in geosynchronous orbit above their original positions. However, I'm detecting energy signatures suggesting preparation for... The AI paused. Sir, they're activating hyperspace engines. They're leaving. Bruce sounded shocked. No. Tony pulled up the energy readings, his enhanced understanding of arc reactor technology helping him interpret the alien power signatures. They're preparing to jump, but not away. They're bringing something in. The implication hung in the air like a death sentence. Reinforcements, Steve said flatly. Thor gripped Mjolnir. How many? Tony did the calculations, comparing the hyperspace energy buildup to the Star Destroyer's arrival signatures. The numbers made no sense. Then they did, and his blood ran cold. Jarvis, verify this. Tell me I'm reading it wrong. I cannot, sir. The hyperspace distortion suggests multiple capital ships. Estimate 12 to 15 Star Destroyer-class vessels. 15 Star Destroyers. 50 times the firepower that had nearly destroyed Earth. Enough vessels to blockade the entire planet, to impose absolute control, to make resistance physically impossible. They were testing us, Natasha realized. 3 ships. See how we respond. See what weapons we have. Now they're bringing overwhelming force. When? Fury demanded, based on energy buildup patterns. 18 hours. Just before the ultimatum expires. Bruce's voice was hollow. We can't fight 15 Star Destroyers. Even if we had the Jericho stations at full power, even with Thor, we'd lose, Tony finished. Badly, completely. Steve looked at each team member, seeing the same realization reflected in their eyes. They'd fought hard, they'd drawn blood. They'd proven humanity wouldn't kneel easily. But the Empire had barely tried. We need options, Fury said, his voice cutting through the despair. Stark, how long until your cyber warfare initiative produces results? Best case? 2 days. Realistically, a week, maybe never. Imperial encryption is insane. Thor, can Asgard intervene? The god shook his head grimly. Heimdall has informed me that Odin considers Earth outside Asgard's protective sphere. We are allies, but not subjects. He will not commit Asgardian forces to a war against an interstellar power. So we're alone. We've always been alone, Steve said quietly. That's never stopped us before. It should probably stop us now, Clint muttered. I'm all for hopeless last stands, but this is suicide. Then what's the alternative? Steve challenged. Surrender. Become subjects of an empire that murders civilians as policy. That strips worlds of freedom and calls it protection? Maybe survival is worth the price. Not this price. Steve's voice cracked like a whip. The moment we accept tyranny for safety, we stop being human. We become slaves. And I'd rather die free than live in chains. The room fell silent. Finally, Tony spoke. Cap's right, but he's also wrong. We can't win by fighting, we can't win by hiding, and we can't win by surrendering. He looked up, meeting Fury's eye. So we win by changing the game entirely. Explain. The Empire thinks in terms of military conquest. Planets resist or submit, and either way, the Empire controls the outcome. But what if we don't play that game? What if we make Earth so chaotic, so unpredictable, so fundamentally ungovernable that occupation becomes impossible? Natasha's eyes lit with understanding. Scorched Earth, but not militarily, socially, economically. Exactly. We can't stop them from landing, but we can make sure there's nothing worth landing for. Decentralize everything, distribute resources, turn Earth into a million little resistances they can't possibly contain. That's... Bruce struggled for words. That's talking about dismantling global civilization. It's talking about survival, Tony countered. 15 Star Destroyers means the war is over before it begins. But insurgency, resistance, that's winnable. It'll take years, maybe decades, but it's possible. Fury considered this. You're proposing we lose deliberately, give up territory, infrastructure, cities, everything except the will to resist. I'm proposing we survive long enough to win later. The silence stretched. Then Steve nodded slowly. It could work, if we're willing to pay the cost. The cost is everything we've built, Bruce said. The alternative is slavery, Steve replied. I'll take ruins over chains. The plan, if it could be called a plan, was desperate, brutal, and utterly insane. Over the next 12 hours, S.H.I.E.L.D. coordinated the most ambitious decentralization effort in human history. Critical infrastructure was duplicated and hidden. Data centers were distributed across thousands of locations. Manufacturing capabilities were dispersed to facilities the Empire couldn't easily identify. Financial systems were crashed deliberately, records encrypted and scattered. Tony worked without sleep, his hands flying across holographic interfaces as he guided the dismantling of the modern world. Jarvis, status on the technology distribution? 47% complete. Arc reactor schematics have been transmitted to 300 independent facilities worldwide. Stark Industries' patents are now public domain. The repulsor technology has been weaponized, I know. Can't be helped. Tony pulled up another display showing S.H.I.E.L.D.'s black site locations. Fury, we need to evacuate these facilities before the Empire arrives. Already in progress, Fury replied over comms. But we're running out of time. The hyperspace signatures are intensifying. They'll be here in 6 hours, not 18. They're accelerating the timetable, Natasha observed from her station. They know we're preparing something. Steve entered the command center in full uniform, shield strapped to his back. The replacement shield had fabricated overnight, unpainted vibranium that lacked the iconic design, but retained the functionality. Evacuation protocols are 50% complete, but we've got a problem. Multiple governments are refusing to participate. They're maintaining infrastructure, keeping populations in major cities. They want to demonstrate cooperation when the Empire arrives. Collaboration, Bruce said bitterly, looking up from his own workstation where he'd been analyzing Vader's combat patterns. They're choosing collaboration over resistance. Can we blame them? Thor asked from the window where he'd been watching storm clouds gather. His storm clouds, called unconsciously as frustration mounted. They see 15 Star Destroyers descending and conclude that survival requires submission. It is not courage they lack, but hope. Then we give them hope, Steve said firmly. Show them resistance is possible. How? Clint asked, sharpening arrows he knew would be inadequate against Imperial armor. We barely survived 3 ships. 15 is mathematically impossible, not if we don't fight all 15 at once. Tony pulled up orbital projections. They'll spread out, establish overlapping coverage. Standard Imperial occupation doctrine according to Leia's intel. But that means each ship covers specific territory. We pick one ship, one target, and we make an example. You want to destroy a Star Destroyer, Bruce said slowly. With what? Our one-shot superweapons are depleted. Not destroy, board. Tony highlighted the Star Destroyer schematics Leia had provided, specifically the shield generators. Shields are designed to repel external attacks, missiles, energy weapons, orbital strikes. They're not designed to stop small craft that are already inside the perimeter. If we can get a team aboard, sabotage the shield generators from within, the ship becomes vulnerable to external attack, Natasha finished. Clever, suicidal but clever. It's a statement, Steve said, studying the plan with tactical appreciation. One Star Destroyer destroyed sends a message. Earth won't roll over. It buys time, creates uncertainty, maybe even makes the Empire reconsider. Thor nodded slowly. And if we fail? We fail spectacularly and probably die, Tony admitted. But we fail fighting, which is better than dying on our knees. Fury materialized on the central display, calling in from a secure location. The Security Council is demanding we stand down. They want to present a unified submission to the Empire, avoid provocative actions that might endanger negotiations. Tell them to get bent, Tony replied. Already did, in more diplomatic terms. But they're not wrong about one thing. If we attack and fail, the Empire will retaliate. Palpatine's offer of peaceful integration goes out the window. We'll be facing conquest, not occupation. We're facing conquest anyway, Steve said. Palpatine's promises are lies. Every bit of intelligence from Leia confirms it. The Empire doesn't negotiate. It dominates. Then we're committed. Fury's single eye fixed on each team member through the screen. This is it. Last chance to walk away. Find somewhere to hide. Hope the Empire overlooks you. No one would blame you. No one moved. Didn't think so. Fury almost smiled. SHIELD will provide insertion support. We've got one modified Quinjet that might, and I emphasize might, get past Imperial sensors long enough to reach a hangar bay. After that, you're on your own. Story of our lives, Clint muttered. Which Star Destroyer? Natasha asked, studying the orbital positions. The damaged one, Tony decided. Vader's flagship over New York. It took hits from the Jericho stations. Shields are probably still recovering, and they'll be running diagnostics. Security will be focused on repairs, not intrusion. That's also where Vader will be, Bruce pointed out. I know. Tony's expression was grim. But if we're making a statement, it should be personal. We bloodied his nose on the ground. Let's do it again in space. Thor raised Mjolnir, lightning dancing across its surface. When do we depart? 4 hours. Enough time to prep, not enough time to overthink. Tony pulled up the mission parameters. Insertion team, me, Cap, Thor, Nat. Clint provides sniper support from the Quinjet. Bruce, I'm coming. Bruce interrupted, his voice quiet but absolute. Bruce, if the other guy comes out inside a spaceship, then he comes out. But you need him, Tony. You need someone who can punch through bulkheads, absorb hits that would kill anyone else, and generally cause chaos while you reach the shield generators. Bruce met his gaze steadily. I'm coming. Don't argue. Tony wanted to argue. Wanted to say it was too dangerous, too unpredictable. But Bruce was right. They needed the Hulk. Fine, but you stay controlled until we need you. That's always the plan. Fury distributed final briefing materials, Imperial ship layouts, known patrol routes, contingency extraction plans that everyone knew were optimistic fiction. The Quinjet was being prepped in a secure hangar. Weapons were being loaded. Goodbyes were being said by people who knew they might not return. Tony found himself in his lab one final time, staring at the arc reactor in his chest. The soft blue glow pulsed steadily, a reminder of the shrapnel that should have killed him, the technology that had saved his life and launched him into this impossible existence. He'd built an empire of innovation, amassed wealth beyond measure, and now he was preparing to throw it all away on a mission that would probably end with his frozen corpse drifting in orbit. "Worth it," he muttered to himself. "Sir?" Jarvis queried. "Nothing. Just make sure the world gets all my research. Everything. If we don't come back, humanity needs every advantage." "Already distributed, sir. Though I calculate a 67% probability you'll return." "Those are terrible odds. Better than yesterday's calculation. You're improving." Despite everything, Tony smiled. "Thanks, Jarvis." "You're welcome, sir. Try not to die. I've grown fond of our conversations." The team assembled in the hangar bay. Steve wore his uniform with quiet dignity. Natasha checked weapons with mechanical precision. Thor looked simultaneously eager and solemn. Bruce stood slightly apart, breathing exercises keeping the transformation at bay. Clint performed final checks on the Quinjet, his hands steady despite the tremor of fear everyone felt but refused to voice. They boarded in silence. The Quinjet lifted off, stealth systems engaged, climbing toward the Star Destroyer that hung above Manhattan like a monument to Imperial inevitability. As they ascended through clouds and into the thin upper atmosphere, Earth fell away below, blue and green and fragile, utterly precious. "You know," Tony said over the team channel, "I've been in space before. Fought aliens, flew through wormholes, the usual billionaire superhero stuff. But this is different." "How so?" Steve asked. "Before, I was defending home. Now I'm leaving it. Maybe for good." Tony looked through the viewport at the growing silhouette of the Star Destroyer. "Just wanted to say, if this goes south, if we don't make it back, it's been an honor." "We're not dying today," Steve said firmly. "We're making history." "Those aren't mutually exclusive, Cap." "No, but I prefer to make history while still breathing." The Quinjet entered the Star Destroyer's shield perimeter, sensors screaming warnings as targeting systems locked on. Then, miraculously, they passed through. The shields were designed to stop high-energy threats. The Quinjet, running cold, moving slowly, broadcasting a captured Imperial identification code, registered as a returning shuttle. They were in. The hangar bay loomed before them, massive beyond comprehension, filled with TIE fighters and Imperial shuttles. Stormtroopers moved in organized patterns. Officers consulted datapads. No one looked up as the Quinjet landed in a corner designated for auxiliary craft. "Phase 1 complete," Natasha whispered. "Now comes the hard part." The boarding ramp lowered. The Avengers stepped onto an Imperial Star Destroyer, and deep within the ship, in a meditation chamber surrounded by darkness, Darth Vader's eyes opened behind his mask. He had felt their arrival through the Force, and he was waiting. The interior of the Star Destroyer was sterile perfection. Corridors of gray metal stretching into geometric infinity, lit by cold white panels that eliminated shadows. Stormtroopers marched in precise formations, their boots echoing in mechanical rhythm. Officers in olive gray uniforms consulted datapads and barked orders. Everything moved with the efficiency of a machine, cold and impersonal. The Avengers moved through it like ghosts. Natasha had acquired stormtrooper armor from a supply depot, the white plates fitting surprisingly well. Steve wore an officer's uniform stripped from an unattended locker. They walked with borrowed confidence through corridors that should have been impossible to navigate, following the schematics Leia had provided. Tony and Bruce moved through maintenance shafts, the Iron Man armor compressed into a briefcase-sized package, while Thor, too distinctive to disguise, waited in the Quinjet with Clint, ready for emergency extraction. "Shield generator is 3 decks down," Tony whispered over encrypted comms, crawling through a ventilation shaft that definitely wasn't designed for human traversal. "Bruce, you still with me?" "Barely." Bruce panted, his larger frame struggling with the tight space. Remind me why we didn't just fight our way in. Because fighting alerts Vader, and Vader kills us. Stealth keeps us breathing. They dropped into a maintenance corridor, deserted except for repair droids that ignored their presence. Tony assembled the Iron Man armor in 45 seconds, the components snapping together with practiced precision. Jarvis, local network access. Attempting. Sir, their systems are incredibly sophisticated. Encryption protocols are unlike anything in Earth databases. However, Princess Leia's access codes are functional. I'm in. Map the fastest route to the shield generators. A holographic pathway appeared in Tony's HUD, winding through maintenance areas and service corridors. They moved quickly, encountering minimal resistance. 2 technicians, who Bruce subdued with nerve strikes Natasha had taught him. 1 security droid that Tony disabled with a precisely aimed repulsor blast. Meanwhile, Steve and Natasha reached the command deck. The bridge was vast, populated by dozens of officers monitoring stations that controlled weapons, shields, navigation, and communication. Viewports showed Earth rotating below, peaceful and vulnerable. And at the center, standing before the main viewport with his back to the bridge, stood Darth Vader. He hadn't moved since they'd entered, hadn't turned, hadn't acknowledged their presence. But he knew. Captain Rogers, Vader said without turning, his mechanical breathing filling the silence. Agent Romanoff, your disguises are adequate for fooling my subordinates, but you cannot hide from the Force. Every officer on the bridge suddenly noticed the infiltrators. Hands moved toward weapons. Alert klaxons began to wail. Steve's hand went to his shield, Natasha's to her weapons. "Stand down," Vader commanded his crew. The officers froze, confused. "These warriors have come to challenge the Empire. It would be discourteous to deny them." He turned slowly, his cape billowing despite the lack of wind. "You are brave. Foolish, but brave. You board my flagship knowing you cannot win, cannot escape, cannot accomplish anything except dying with dignity." The helmet tilted slightly. "I respect this, so I offer you a choice. Surrender now, and I will ensure your deaths are quick. Resist, and I will make examples of you that will break your world's spirit." Steve stepped forward, shield raised. "We don't surrender to fascists." Fascism, an interesting term for order. Vader's lightsaber ignited, the crimson blade casting red shadows across the bridge. "Very well. Let us end this." He attacked with terrifying speed. Steve barely got his shield up in time, the lightsaber striking vibranium with a sound like a collapsing star. The force of the blow sent him skidding backward. Natasha fired, not at Vader, but at the bridge controls, her shots carefully placed to disable communication and targeting systems. Sparks erupted. Officers dove for cover. Vader gestured dismissively, and Natasha's guns crumpled like paper. Then he was on Steve again, lightsaber moving in forms perfected over decades, each strike designed to overwhelm defense and create openings. Steve fought defensively, using the shield not to block but to deflect, redirecting energy rather than absorbing it. "You fight well for a primitive," Vader observed, his breathing never changing rhythm despite the exertion. "But you are merely delaying the inevitable." 3 decks below, Tony and Bruce reached the shield generator. The chamber was massive, dominated by a cylindrical structure 30 feet tall that hummed with barely contained energy. Technicians monitored displays, unaware of the intruders. Tony's HUD identified the weak points, power couplings that fed energy from the main reactor to the shield emitters. "Jarvis, can we disable it without causing a catastrophic failure?" "Define catastrophic, sir." "Exploding and killing everyone aboard." "Then no, the shield generator is integrated with primary systems. Disabling it will cause cascade failures throughout the ship. Estimate 70% probability of reactor destabilization." Tony and Bruce exchanged glances. So we sabotage it, and maybe the entire ship explodes? Essentially, yes. Good enough. Tony moved toward the power couplings, repulsors charging. An alarm shrieked. The technicians noticed them. Blast doors began closing, and through the force 3 decks above, Vader felt the danger. No! The Dark Lord's voice resonated with fury. He extended one hand toward the ceiling and through sheer will compressed the metal, sending a shockwave through the ship's structure. All forces, shield generator chambers, stop the saboteurs! Stormtroopers poured into the chamber, blaster fire filling the air. Tony took cover behind the generator itself, returning fire with repulsors. Bruce was hit twice, armor-piercing rounds that penetrated his shirt and drew blood. The blood that triggered the transformation. Bruce's eyes went green. Muscles exploded outward. The Hulk roared, and suddenly the stormtroopers' weapons were inadequate. The green giant grabbed one trooper and used him as a club against 3 others. Blaster fire that struck him left scorch marks that healed instantly. He was rage incarnate, and the Empire had never faced anything like him. Hulk smash space Nazis! Tony almost laughed, despite the situation. Bruce, sorry Hulk. Keep them busy. I need 30 seconds. The Hulk grinned savagely and charged the incoming reinforcements. Tony worked frantically, his armor's tools interfacing with Imperial technology that operated on principles he barely understood. Jarvis guided him through the process, identifying which couplings to sever, which conduits to overload. Sparks flew. Energy readings spiked dangerously. Sir, if you continue, the reactor will reach critical mass in approximately 4 minutes. That's 4 minutes more than we need. Do it. The final coupling severed. The shield generator's hum changed pitch, rising to a whine that hurt even through the armor. Warning lights flooded the chamber in red emergency illumination. Automated systems began emergency shutdown procedures that Tony had specifically sabotaged to prevent. Done. Hulk, we're leaving. On the bridge, Vader felt the shields collapse, felt the reactor destabilizing, felt his flagship dying around him. His fury was palpable, a wave of dark side energy that made every officer on the bridge stumble. You would destroy this vessel, he said to Steve, who was barely standing, shield dented and body bruised. Kill thousands of my crew. For what? A symbolic victory? For hope, Steve replied, blood on his lips. To show Earth you can bleed. Vader raised his lightsaber for the killing blow. Thor's lightning struck first. The god of thunder crashed through the viewport, already weakened by Natasha's earlier shots, wreathed in electrical fury. Mjolnir met lightsaber, and the collision sent both warriors staggering. Captain, time to leave! Natasha was already moving, dragging Steve toward the emergency exit. Thor fought defensively, using lightning and hammer to drive Vader back step by step. The Dark Lord was stronger, more skilled, but Thor was desperate and time was running out. Quinjet incoming, Clint's voice over comms. 30 seconds to extraction point. The ship shuddered. Secondary explosions rippled through the lower decks as the reactor's cascade failure spread. Officers abandoned their posts, rushing for escape pods. The Star Destroyer was dying, and everyone aboard knew it. Tony and the Hulk fought their way through corridors filled with fleeing Imperials, heading for the hangar bay where the Quinjet waited. They passed TIE fighters being scrambled, shuttles launching, organized evacuation turning to panicked exodus. On the bridge, Vader made his choice. He could kill these warriors, probably. But staying meant dying with his ship. The Emperor would not forgive the loss of a Star Destroyer for mere vengeance. This is not over, Vader promised Thor. Then he turned and strode toward his personal shuttle, cape billowing, leaving Steve and Natasha gasping on the deck. Thor helped them up. Can you run? Do we have a choice? They ran. The Avengers converged on the hangar bay as the Star Destroyer's death throes intensified. Explosions rocked the deck. Artificial gravity fluctuated. The Quinjet hovered at the hangar entrance, boarding ramp extended, Clint at the controls, shouting encouragement. They boarded, Steve and Natasha first, then Tony in the Mark 42, finally Thor carrying the Hulk, who had shrunk back to Bruce mid-evacuation. The Quinjet screamed away from the dying ship, engines pushing beyond safety limits, as behind them the Star Destroyer's reactor finally failed. The explosion was visible from Earth, a brief new star that outshone the moon for 3 seconds before fading. Debris scattered across orbital space. Thousands of Imperial crew died instantly, and humanity, watching from below, saw an impossible sight. A Star Destroyer destroyed. The Empire could bleed. The destruction of Vader's flagship changed everything and nothing. Within hours, the remaining 14 Star Destroyers repositioned into a tight orbital formation above Earth, their weapons trained downward in silent threat. Vader transferred his command to a sister ship, his fury palpable even from the ground. Emperor Palpatine's response was delivered personally, a transmission that promised retribution so absolute that generations would remember Earth's defiance as cautionary tale. But something fundamental had shifted. In the hours following the Star Destroyer's destruction, resistance cells erupted across every continent, not coordinated by S.H.I.E.L.D. or the Avengers, but spontaneous, people who had watched a Star Destroyer burn and decided tyranny could be fought. AIM's attacks intensified. Wakanda revealed itself to the world, T'Chaka offering sanctuary and vibranium weapons to resistance fighters. Even nations that had advocated surrender began quietly supporting guerrilla operations. The Avengers returned to Earth as heroes and terrorists simultaneously. The World Security Council condemned their actions. Fury was officially court-martialed, unofficially given command of global resistance operations. Tony distributed every piece of technology he'd ever created, making arc reactors and repulsor weapons available to anyone willing to fight. Steve coordinated with military forces worldwide, teaching them tactics the Empire had never encountered. Thor remained on Earth despite Asgard's official neutrality, his lightning a beacon of defiant hope. Princess Leia's Rebel Alliance made contact, real contact, not just data transmissions. Ships began arriving through carefully hidden hyperspace routes, bringing weapons, intelligence, and, most importantly, proof that the Empire could be defeated. Slowly, bloodily, but defeated nonetheless. The occupation that followed was brutal. The Empire established martial law, installed puppet governments, and made examples of resistance fighters that horrified even hardened soldiers. Entire cities were destroyed as punishment for harboring insurgents. Millions died in the first month alone, but millions more fought back. Earth became what Tony had proposed, ungovernable chaos. Every street a potential ambush, every citizen a possible spy, every building a potential bomb. The Empire had the technology, the numbers, the overwhelming force, but they were fighting an enemy that refused to centralize, refused to negotiate, and refused to stop. Vader hunted the Avengers personally, coming closest to success when he cornered Steve in the ruins of Philadelphia. Only Thor's intervention saved Captain America's life, though Steve would carry scars, physical and psychological, from that encounter forever. The Dark Lord learned what countless tyrants had learned before him. You can kill warriors, but you cannot kill the idea they represent. 3 years into the occupation, the first Star Destroyer was captured intact by a combined force of Rebel Alliance operatives and human resistance fighters. The propaganda value alone was incalculable, but more importantly, it gave Earth access to hyperspace technology. Humanity could finally leave its cradle, taking the fight beyond its atmosphere. 5 years in, Emperor Palpatine recalled half the occupation fleet. Earth was consuming too many resources, bleeding too many soldiers, providing too much inspiration to other resistance movements across the galaxy. The cost of holding one primitive world was becoming strategically untenable. 7 years after first contact, a damaged Rebel Alliance fleet limped into Earth's solar system, pursued by Imperial forces. The Battle of Earth's moon became legendary. Human ships with hastily installed hyperdrives fighting alongside Rebel X-Wings and stolen TIE fighters, defending a world that had learned to fight among the stars. The Empire never left completely. Outposts remained. Blockades continued. Vader himself maintained a personal vendetta, returning periodically to hunt those who had humiliated him. But total conquest, the kind Palpatine had envisioned, never came to pass. Earth had shown the galaxy something important, that the Empire was not inevitable, that subjugation could be resisted, that even the most overwhelming power could bleed when faced with warriors who refused to kneel. And in S.H.I.E.L.D.'s deepest archives, accessible only to those who had earned it through blood and sacrifice, remained a single recording. Tony Stark, filmed the night before the Star Destroyer mission, speaking to a future he wasn't sure he'd see. If you're watching this, I'm probably dead. But I died fighting, which is better than dying slowly under Imperial rule. Remember this. The Empire won through fear. They convinced 1,000 worlds that resistance was futile. We proved them wrong. 1 planet, 6 people, 1 destroyed Star Destroyer. That's all it took to crack the myth of invincibility. So keep fighting, keep bleeding them, keep reminding the galaxy that humanity bows to no one. And maybe, just maybe, we'll live to see the Empire fall. May the Force... He paused, grinning. May the Force kiss my ass. We've got our own power. See you on the other side. The video ended with Tony raising an arc reactor, its blue light defiant against the darkness. Earth survived, not unscathed, not unchanged, but free. And across the galaxy, on 1,000 occupied worlds, beings who had never heard of humanity whispered a new story, of primitives who destroyed a Star Destroyer, of warriors who made Vader himself retreat, of a world that chose ruins over chains. The legend of Earth's defiance became a weapon more powerful than any Star Destroyer. And in his meditation chamber, light years away, Darth Vader stared at a holographic image of Earth and felt something he hadn't experienced in decades. Respect. May the Force be with you. More stories await.